Okay, so before we start building our building volume, let's take a minute and kind of organize some things. I'm going to select some items. I'm going to left click and make a box over a set of things and create a group by right clicking. That allows me to double click on there and call it something. I'm going to call this property line. In color. Click off of that. I want to kind of gather up this idea of the surface patch and the UV space all together. So I'll try to grab all of these and group them. And actually, I'm going to do that. I'm going to undo that in a minute, and I'm going to just try and get this other one in here. And create a group. Whoops. I just actually created a node out of it, which is a cool thing, but that's for another topic. Let me do that one more time. Because you can condense all of these things down into a single definition, which is a really cool feature. Create a group, and we'll call this the site as UV space. And this will always help us to remember what these elements are as we were building them before. Okay, so we've got a couple of those things organized, and we're now going to make our first, actually our first like floor of the building. So let's take our rectangle, and what we want to do is really extrude it out. So I'm going to use curve and extrude as solid. So let's see if we can find that definition. We'll go to geometry, we'll go to curves. And sorry about the motorcycle. That's going to be noisy. I'm going to hit pause here a minute. Okay, so as the motorcycle fades off, I'll come back to this idea of taking our rectangle and extruding it. So we're under geometry, curves, and extrude as a solid. Extrude as solid. And we only really need distance. So let's see, extrude as solid distance. We'll plug the rectangle in, and we need a distance, and we'll do that with a code block. And we're going to put a separation between the floors just to make it graphically a little easier to see. So we're going to make our floors 12 feet high. And I'm going to put another number in, and we're not going to use it for a minute. That's going to be 15 feet. That's the spacing. So there'll be like 3 feet between the floors. And that'll just make it visually something we can look at to see later. Okay, so now we have our first extrusion of our floor. If I click on that, you can see the blue is now a box. And the next thing we want to do is make moldable floors. So I'm going to look at a way to do that. And I'm going to go through a process of well, let's work on the basic concept. We want a building to have a basic gross square footage, and each level will have its own individual square footage that when summed together will make the total, and that number of units will be the number of floors that we want. So first off, before we get into the math of that, we want to have something that we can actually move our geometry with. And so we can go to geometry and translate, and I don't know if that is easy to find here. So I'm going to save time. I'm going to go geometry translate. I don't know why that's there. It is translate, and we have an X, Y, and Z direction. So we'll go ahead and grab that. I'm going to feed this geometry in, and now we have that 15, and we'll just put that in just momentarily, and that'll allow that shape to move. And it moved to 15. Oops, moved to 12. We want it to move to 15, and that gives us our gap. So let me just show you what that gap's all about. I'll just try to pivot this down. So now you can see the idea is we've got two stories and a little gap to kind of give us a visual between them. And we'll add a color to that in a minute. As a matter of fact, we could do that right now. So I'm just going to grab this whole code block, and I'll move it over. And we'll feed our geometry in here. It happens to be red. We want another color, so let's just move this to green. And we'll call this level and color. All right, now obviously our first one isn't fed into that geometry, and we'll go through and we'll correct that as we move along. So actually, I'll just get rid of the gray one right away. I'll just unpreview this one. And now we've just moved one object off one position. So let's now just take a few minutes, make a code block that kind of gives us the idea of the math that we want to create for this. Let me see what our time is. It's 5 minutes, so I'll just get started on this code block. And let's just think about, and we can literally write words out. This is a nice thing about the code block. So we'll go target square foot. And that's the amount of square footage that we want our project to have. We're going to input our building width. Oops, I'm going to leave that all one word because we want it to be a variable. And so these make the numbers actually more legible to us later on. So we know that if we have a certain building width and it's square, our total square footage for any level is, you know, the floor's square footage. I'll just call that the term. SQ feet. And that's equal to the building width. And that's really just this variable I just put in. So I'll just do copy. And then I'll do times as I look for my symbol. And I'll just paste it again. And a semicolon. Okay, so that gives us a total floor area. And then our, it's an easy calculation, then our number of stories. And once again, it's a variable, so we're writing it all as one word, is equal to target divided by floor square foot. Actually, I want to do, I'll just copy these down, just so I don't type them wrong like I just did. Oops, I just translated those letters. So it's the target square foot, the total amount, times the actual square footage on each floor will give us the number of floors. And that won't be a solid integer, it'll be some part, and so we'll just kind of want to round that off, and I'll show you how to do that next. So we can start feeding our information into this code block. So I'm going to just start by getting our, actually I'm going to make a new one which is called target square feet. So over here I'm just going to, I'll make a code block. And we'll call it, we'll just put the number in. I'm going to say 25,000 square feet just to get us started. And I'll rename this by right-clicking on it and renaming the node. And we'll call this target square feet. That can be divided off because it's not a variable. Okay, so that gives us an output of 25, you know, and we can just go in and change this. It could also be a slider if we wanted, but for the sake of the start of this, so I'm going to feed the target square footage into it, and I'm going to put the building width into it, and for now I'll pull this down so we can look at this really closely, I guess, and we should then see an output here, and let's see what we got going on here. All right, so I might need to have a I got a couple of typos there. I'm going to pause this. We'll pick up on the math in the next clip because we've gone up to 10 minutes. So we'll see you on the other side.